A nervous girl sang at a friend's wedding and unknowingly seduced a man worth millions. She was just a bookstore assistant with a secret voice. He was a billionaire CEO who never believed in love until her song stopped him cold at a stranger's wedding. What happens when a shy woman with nothing to lose meets a man with everything to protect? When one haunting melody ignites a spark that neither of them saw coming. This isn't just a love story. It's a collision of dreams, power, and the kind of truth that doesn't wait for permission. Stay with us, because what started as a simple performance became a life neither of them could have imagined. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. Beneath a sky blushing with the last traces of sun, under a canopy of fairy lights and magnolia blossoms, a wedding unfolded in the heart of Charleston that no one would forget, but not for the reasons expected. All eyes were on the bride until a quiet figure in lavender stepped onto the garden stage. Clara Ryland, a 28-year-old bookstore clerk with dreams she'd long buried, gripped the microphone with fingers that trembled like leaves in the wind. She wasn't a performer. She wasn't even supposed to sing. But a promise is a promise. And today, her best friend was getting married. The piano began, soft and slow. Barely there. Clara's voice followed. It was raw, not flawless, but true. A sound like memory, like longing, like something deep inside her refusing to be silenced any longer. Guests stopped talking. Forks froze midair, and halfway back, seated alone near a whiskey glass he hadn't touched, Nathan Calloway, 42, widowed, reclusive, and one of the most powerful men in New York's financial world, looked up. He didn't know who she was, but something in her voice didn't just catch his attention. It cracked something open in him. It wasn't just a song. It was a confession. And it pulled him into a memory of someone he'd lost and someone he'd yet to meet. Clara's voice hit the highest note, and it broke slightly. Not because she couldn't reach it, but because she felt it too deeply. It was that vulnerability, that honesty, that made Nathan's breath catch in his throat. He didn't clap when the song ended, not because he wasn't moved, but because he physically couldn't. His hands were frozen. His heart, long believed to be beyond resurrection, stirred for the first time in years. Applause swelled around him. Guests wiped tears. The bride ran up to embrace Clara, mascara streaking her cheeks, but Nathan didn't move. He sat there, stunned, haunted by the voice of a stranger, a voice that had somehow felt like home. Later, as the reception glimmered on with clinking champagne glasses and laughter, Clara stood alone behind the tent, trying to steady her breath. She had done it. She hadn't run. She hadn't cracked. But somewhere inside her, something had shifted, and she didn't yet realize that someone with power, with grief, with a soul more fractured than he'd ever admit, was already searching for her name. Because Nathan Calloway, the man everyone called unreachable, had just heard a song that he couldn't forget. Not now, not ever. And the story that would change both their lives had only just begun. Before we continue, if this story has already sparked your curiosity, touched something in your heart, or made you wonder where this connection might lead, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more heartfelt, unforgettable stories just like this one to life. Let's journey to the end together. Of all the things Clara Ryland had expected to happen after that wedding, A man in a dark tailored suit walking into the bookstore where she worked definitely wasn't one of them. It had been 4 days since she sang. 4 days of trying to forget how terrifying and freeing it felt to let her voice out after years of hiding it. She hadn't told anyone how much it stirred her, not even her best friend, the bride, because she didn't want to admit that it had awakened something she'd tried to put to sleep long ago. She was shelving a stack of newly arrived poetry books when the soft chime of the front door sounded. The usual sound of tourists and locals came and went throughout the day, but this step was different. Measured, confident. Clara turned around just as the stranger approached the counter. He was tall, his dark hair graying at the temples, and his suit looked like it had never known a wrinkle. His presence immediately silenced the low hum of background jazz and whispered conversation. The entire room tilted just slightly. "Clara Ryland?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with restraint. "Yes," she answered, wary. The man extended a card, gold-edged and simple. "My name is Julian Pierce. I work with Mr. Nathan Calloway. He'd like to invite you to dinner." She blinked at him, stunned. "I'm sorry. Who?" "Nathan Calloway," Julian repeated patiently. "He was at the wedding in Charleston. He heard you sing." Clara stared at the card like it might vanish if she touched it. "Is this a joke?" "It's not." Julian gave her a half smile. "Mr. Calloway is a private man. He doesn't do things like this often, or ever." She didn't know what to say. The last few days had already been surreal enough. And now, the reclusive CEO, who made national headlines once a year for billion-dollar mergers and a famously closed-off personal life, was inviting her to dinner because she sang a song. I'm just a bookstore clerk," she mumbled. "You're also the woman whose voice made a room full of people stop breathing," Julian said quietly. He noticed, and he'd like to know more. Later that evening, Clara stood outside the Grayfield, an impossibly elegant restaurant atop a Manhattan high-rise she'd only ever read about in magazines. She nearly turned back 3 times before stepping inside. The hostess, as if expecting her, smiled and guided her toward a candlelit table by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched below like a sea of stars. Nathan Calloway stood as she approached. No tie, sleeves rolled to his forearms, but every inch of him radiated quiet control. He reached out to shake her hand. "Clara," he said, with a softness that surprised her. "Thank you for coming." She sat down slowly, still half convinced she was in some kind of dream. "You really had someone track me down because of a song?" "I didn't just hear you," Nathan replied, meeting her eyes. "I saw you. You sang like it meant something, like you weren't just performing. You were remembering." His words made her pulse skip. She didn't know how to explain the ache that singing had stirred in her chest. It wasn't about talent. It was about release, about grief, about finally breathing. "I used to sing more," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back when I thought it might lead somewhere." "It still can," Nathan said. They talked through dinner. At first, awkwardly. He ordered with the ease of someone who lived in this world, and she picked at her plate like someone who didn't. But as the wine softened her nerves and his questions grew more personal, not invasive, just curious, Clara found herself telling him about her small apartment, the shelves of books, the reason she stopped auditioning for music schools. He listened like few people ever had. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look at his phone. He simply listened. She learned he had been widowed young, that the business empire he inherited wasn't what he wanted, but something he felt obligated to build after his father's sudden death. That music had been something he once loved, but it became too painful after his wife passed. And now, for the first time in years, something had made him want to listen again. "I don't normally do this," he said, looking across the table. "Invite strangers to dinner, but you didn't feel like a stranger." Clara laughed quietly. "You're not exactly what I expected either." "What did you expect?" "A man too busy for people like me." Nathan tilted his head. "People like you?" "Normal ones." He smiled. Not the practiced one for cameras, but something gentler. "I'm not looking for perfect, Clara. I'm looking for honest." And in that moment, something shifted, an invisible thread stitching between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition, as if two people who had long been lost to the noise of life had suddenly heard each other, loud and clear, and neither one could walk away now, even if they wanted to. It had been 3 weeks since that first dinner, 3 weeks of quiet messages and slow, deliberate meetings. Nathan Calloway didn't sweep Clara Ryland off her feet. He didn't try to dazzle her with gestures or overwhelm her with promises. Instead, he gave her space. And oddly enough, it was the space itself that pulled her closer. He invited her to his office one late afternoon. Not for a date, he said, but for something different. Clara hesitated before accepting. She wasn't used to navigating a world built on marble floors, glass walls, and sleek elevators that whispered instead of clanked. Yet when the elevator doors opened directly into Nathan's penthouse-like workspace, she didn't feel out of place. She felt seen. He greeted her with a warm smile, eyes tired but kind. "I want to show you something," he said, guiding her past the reception area, through a hallway lined with abstract art and soft light. They entered a smaller room, modest compared to the grandeur of the rest of the building, yet intimate and deliberate. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Children laughing, dancing, painting. Young girls with violins, boys sketching on sidewalks. Clara walked slowly past the display, absorbing the energy of every captured moment. "This," Nathan said, his voice softer now, "is the side of my life no one sees." She turned to him, puzzled. "What is all this?" "The Calloway Initiative," he replied. "I started it 6 years ago. We fund arts education in underserved communities, music, painting, dance, whatever gives kids a way to express themselves when the world forgets them." Clara's breath caught. She stared at a photo of a boy, maybe 10, holding a worn trumpet like it was gold. His smile was brighter than the sun. "I don't talk about this in boardrooms," Nathan said, watching her carefully. "They don't care. It doesn't raise stock prices. But this is what matters to me." Clara looked back at him, feeling something inside her shift. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think you understand it," he said. "And because I need your help." Her brow furrowed. "Me? Help with this?" He nodded. "We're expanding the program. More cities, more schools. But we're losing the personal touch. My team is brilliant, but they've never held a violin or painted a mural in a shelter basement. They understand the numbers. You understand the soul." Clara stepped back slightly, overwhelmed. "Nathan, I work in a bookstore. I haven't sung on a stage in years. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I've met." he said without hesitation. Because you know what it feels like to lose your voice and what it takes to find it again. She didn't know what to say. The offer was generous, stunning even. But more than that, it felt like something that mattered. Something bigger than her. I don't want you to say yes because you feel obligated, Nathan added, reading the hesitation in her eyes. This isn't charity, it's a partnership. I want your voice, your insight, your presence. Clara ran her fingers along the edge of one of the frames. A girl in a red sweater was caught mid-spin, her face lit with joy. And if I say yes? She asked, voice barely audible. Nathan stepped closer. Then we build something together. She met his eyes and saw no pressure there, no demands, only sincerity. I'll think about it, she whispered. He smiled. That's all I ask. That evening, as she rode the subway back to her neighborhood, far from the glittering towers and corner offices, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the images on those walls, the children, the possibility. For the first time in years, she wasn't imagining a future she had to fight for alone. She was imagining one she could help create, with her voice, her heart, and her past. Later, curled up on her worn couch with a cup of tea and a blanket that smelled like lavender, Clara opened her old journal. Pages of half-written lyrics and abandoned dreams greeted her. At the bottom of one page, long forgotten, she had written a phrase in slanted handwriting. Maybe I'm not done singing yet. She traced it with her finger, smiling quietly. No, she wasn't done. She was just getting started. The following week, Clara said yes. She didn't announce it dramatically or send a formal message. Instead, she walked into Nathan's office on a rainy Tuesday morning, her coat soaked, hair clinging to her face, and simply said, I'm in. Nathan, seated at his desk reviewing proposals, looked up and saw something in her expression that he hadn't seen before. Conviction, tinged with a quiet spark of hope. You're sure? He asked, rising from his chair. Clara nodded. No one's ever asked me to build something that mattered before. I'm not saying I won't get overwhelmed, but yes, I want to try. Nathan smiled, a rare softness entering his features. Then let's begin. What followed was a whirlwind. Clara found herself in planning meetings, creative brainstorms, school site visits. The team was small but driven, and Nathan made it clear she had authority, not just a token title. At first, she tiptoed, offering quiet suggestions, second-guessing herself. But soon, her natural instincts found their footing. She proposed a mentorship track for students interested in pursuing music professionally. She revamped outdated outreach materials, adding warmth, color, storytelling. She even coordinated a small showcase of student performances in Central Park, the first of its kind under the Calloway Initiative's name. With every step, her voice grew steadier. One evening, after a long day of presentations and back-to-back meetings, Clara was leaving the office when Nathan caught up to her in the elevator. Walk with me, he asked. They stepped into the late September night, the city pulsing with life. Sidewalks shimmered from a recent rain, and the air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts from a corner vendor. You've been quiet, Nathan said gently. Clara sighed. I've been thinking. About? She hesitated. This. Us. What we're doing. He glanced sideways, reading her carefully. Too fast. No, she said quickly. Not the work. That feels right. It's strange to feel seen like this. Useful. Valued. I'm not used to being the one people look to for vision. Nathan slowed his pace. You've always had vision, Clara. You just didn't have the stage for it. They stopped at the edge of a fountain, its water catching the light in soft arcs. Clara looked up at him, vulnerability in her eyes. I spent a lot of years convincing myself I was meant to stay small, that I was background music in other people's lives. Nathan shook his head. You're the melody. She smiled faintly. You make it sound easy. It's not, but it's real. A pause settled between them, rich with meaning. Then Clara asked, Why me? Out of all the people you could have brought into this, why a girl from a bookstore who sang once at a wedding? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took her hand, not forcefully, not romantically, just with the kind of intention that comes from deep truth. Because you reminded me what it feels like to care, not for success or legacy, but for something honest. Because I stopped believing in possibility a long time ago. And then you sang one note, and I remembered. Clara felt her throat tighten. I don't want to be your project, she whispered. You're not, Nathan said. You're my partner. In this, maybe more. But only if you want that. She didn't answer. Not yet. But she didn't let go of his hand either. By the time they returned to the building, the city had hushed. Clara looked up at the tower they'd just left, lights glowing like quiet promises against the night sky. Inside her heart, something had shifted. She wasn't just building a program anymore. She was building a life. One note, one choice, one brave step at a time. Clara's mornings began to feel different. She still woke early, but now, instead of dragging herself out of bed with reluctance, she rose with purpose. Her alarm would hum softly in the dark, and she'd sit up slowly, breathing in the quiet stillness before the city stirred. She'd tie her hair back, make coffee, and open her laptop before the sun hit the windowsill. Her email box was full now, not with spam or bills, but ideas, program proposals, donor feedback, notes from teachers, scribbled dreams from kids who wanted to learn to sing, compose, produce. And in every message, she saw a future unfolding. The Calloway Initiative was no longer just Nathan's vision. It had her fingerprints, her voice, her heart. She wasn't just a part of it. She was essential to it. One afternoon, a delivery arrived at the office. A slim wooden box, sealed with a delicate blue ribbon. Clara frowned as she untied it. Inside was a single hand-bound journal. The pages were blank, except for the inscription on the inside cover. For the music you haven't written yet. N. She traced the letters with her fingertips. Nathan didn't need to say much. This gesture was enough. And yet, she still wondered, how could someone who ran empires have time to notice the little things? The way she paused before speaking in meetings. The nervous habit she had of twisting her ring when thinking. The way her voice caught slightly when talking about dreams she'd once buried. He noticed it all, and he made space for it. That scared her. One evening, after a particularly long board meeting, Nathan knocked on her office door. It was almost 9 p.m., the building mostly dark. You haven't eaten, he said. Clara looked up, startled. You keep tabs on my meals now? He held up a small brown paper bag. Only when you skip them 3 days in a row. She raised an eyebrow, but her stomach betrayed her with a growl. Fine, she muttered. You win. They walked to the rooftop terrace, an unassuming space few used, With mismatched chairs and an old wooden table Nathan had insisted on keeping when the rest of the building was renovated. He opened the bag and pulled out two steaming containers of pho from a hole-in-the-wall spot Clara had once raved about. She blinked. "How did you remember?" I listened. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights below them blinking like tiny heartbeats. Finally, Clara set down her chopsticks and leaned back. "Do you ever get tired of always being in control?" she asked quietly. Nathan didn't answer immediately. "Sometimes," he said at last, "but I spent too many years pretending not to care about anything. Controlling things was easier than feeling them." She nodded slowly. "I used to think I didn't matter, that what I wanted was always second to someone else's needs. And the scary part is, I got good at it, at disappearing." Nathan turned toward her, his gaze unflinching. "You're anything but invisible now. I'm still learning how to believe that." "Then let me remind you, as often as you need." Her breath hitched. It wasn't romantic, at least not entirely. It was reverent, like someone holding something fragile and choosing not to crush it. The air turned cooler. Clara stood and walked to the edge of the terrace. Below, the city buzzed on, unaware of the small, quiet miracle happening above it. "I used to think I had to do everything alone," she said without turning around. "But maybe some things are worth doing together." Behind her, she heard the soft scuff of Nathan's shoes as he approached. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara." She turned to face him, and for the first time, she believed it. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Clara sat across from Nathan at a long oak table inside a quiet jazz bar tucked away in the heart of Boston's South End. The bar had been his suggestion, an old haunt of his mother's, he said, where she used to bring him after her rehearsals. The low hum of a saxophone solo played in the background, mingling with the soft patter of rain against the window. It was a place soaked in memory, in music, and something unspoken that hung between them like a note waiting to resolve. "I used to sit right there," Nathan said, gesturing toward a worn leather stool by the stage. "She always told me to listen to how the music breathed. Not just played, but breathed." Clara's eyes softened. "She sounds like someone who saw the world differently." She did, until it broke her. His voice didn't falter, but there was a tightness in it she hadn't heard before. Clara waited. She had learned by now that silence with Nathan wasn't absence. It was space. Eventually, he spoke again. She was a brilliant pianist, but the industry didn't know what to do with a woman who was both talented and loud about it. She got tired, and then one day, she just stopped. No farewell concert, no announcement. She just walked away from it all. That must have been hard to watch. I didn't understand it then. I was angry, thought she was giving up. But now, he looked at Clara, really looked. "I think I finally get it." She was tired of not being allowed to take up space. Clara reached for her mug. "That's something I think a lot of women understand." Nathan nodded slowly, then leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I don't want you to disappear like that, Clara. I want this, what we're building, to be something that feeds you, not something that drains you." She met his gaze. "I want that too, but I also want it to be real. Not a fantasy someone with money made possible for me." "You think this is a fantasy?" "I think I'm scared of what happens when the fantasy ends." Nathan didn't flinch. "Then let's stop pretending it's a fantasy. This isn't magic, Clara. It's work. It's choice. It's waking up every day and choosing the thing that scares you because you believe it's worth it. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. I believed once. Then life chipped away at it. Then let's build it back, brick by brick. You don't have to do it alone. The moment sat between them like a promise, unspoken, undemanding, but real. Later that night, Clara found herself standing in the center of the Calloway Auditorium, empty and echoing with ghosts of past performances. The lights were dimmed. The rows of seats stretched out before her like quiet witnesses, and on the stage sat a single grand piano. She walked toward it slowly. No one had asked her to be there. No meeting, no agenda, just her and the keys. She sat, hesitated, then let her fingers fall into a gentle melody she hadn't played in years. Her music was hesitant at first, like a language she was relearning. But then something unlocked. A memory, maybe, or just courage. And her hands moved with growing confidence. The room filled with sound. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She didn't hear Nathan come in. He stood at the back, unseen, saying nothing, just listening. He could have interrupted, could have applauded, but he didn't. He let her have the moment, fully, completely. And when she finally played the last note, letting it linger in the air like a breath exhaled after holding it too long, she looked up and saw him there. You remembered it, he said softly. It never really left, she replied. He stepped closer, offering her a quiet smile. Neither did I. The next morning, Clara awoke in her apartment with sunlight slanting through the window blinds, casting stripes across the worn wooden floors. Her fingers tingled with a memory that had not been a dream. She had played, really played, for the first time in years, not for approval, not to prove something, but because it had called her back. There was a new stillness in her, a quiet that didn't feel like absence, but peace. And yet, underneath it, nerves began to stir. What now? By mid-morning, she was at the Thorn Foundation office. The city outside was buzzing with the usual weekend energy, but inside, things felt different. Nathan had asked to meet. No calendar invite, no subject line, just, come by when you can. I want to show you something. She found him in the boardroom, standing in front of a wall covered in concept sketches and architectural blueprints. He turned when she entered, offering that familiar smile of his, half confident, half cautious. You look different, he said. Clara raised an eyebrow. In a good way? In the kind of way that tells me you slept after playing for 2 hours straight. Her eyes widened. You stayed the whole time. He gave a slight nod. Of course I did. It was the first time you weren't hiding from yourself. She folded her arms, half bashful, half defensive. I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. For what? For the music to forgive me. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low and steady. You never needed forgiveness, just space. She didn't reply. But the words found their place inside her. He gestured toward the blueprints. I wanted you to see what we're planning. This, he pointed to a rendering of a sleek sunlit space, is the new community music hub. Open access studios, instrument lending libraries, practice rooms. We're building one in every city that partners with the foundation. Clara's breath caught. It's beautiful. It needs a heart, he said, turning toward her. That's where you come in. She blinked. Me? You'll lead the artistic direction. Not just on design or programming, on ethos. You know what it's like to rebuild your voice, to lose it, to find it again. That's what we're giving to these kids. It was too much. Or maybe just enough. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. Why do you trust me with something this big? Because you make it real. She let the silence sit for a moment. Okay, she said. I'm in. A few weeks later, Clara was standing in an empty warehouse in Harlem, the first location scheduled for transformation. The air smelled like concrete dust and potential. Nathan had brought her to see it, but he'd hung back, letting her explore. She moved slowly through the space, already imagining how sound would move here. What walls could come down? What light could be invited in? She saw it not as a structure, but as a song, needing form, harmony, soul. Later, as they exited the building, Nathan opened the car door for her. But instead of sliding in, she turned to him. Do you ever worry it'll all go away? She asked. The drive, the fire, the belief that this matters? All the time, he replied without missing a beat. But that's not what makes it last. She waited. Then what does? Choosing it again and again, even on the days when it feels like it's too much. Clara nodded slowly. What if I'm afraid I'll fail? He smiled, soft and certain. Then I'll be right there, cheering you on as you get back up. In that moment, something in her settled. It wasn't about avoiding fear. It was about letting courage walk beside it. That night, Clara sat at her kitchen table, alone, with a fresh sheet of music paper and a cup of tea. She began to write, not for an audience, not for a client, for herself. For the girl who once believed silence was safer than song. The melody came slowly, unsure at first. But then it picked up, thread by thread, note by note. She hummed softly, her voice stitching itself into the spaces she'd once left blank. Outside, the city roared. But in her apartment, Clara was quiet and brave and beginning again. The first night of the new season, Gala arrived sooner than Clara had expected. The days leading up to it had blurred into a mix of site visits, design meetings, and late-night music sessions at home, where she often found herself barefoot in front of her keyboard, letting ideas flow without inhibition. It wasn't just about composing anymore. It was about constructing a bridge between where she'd come from and what she was building now. And tonight would be her first public step onto that bridge. The event was hosted at the conservatory, where Clara had once auditioned as a scared, unsure 20-year-old. Now, years later, she walked through the grand arched entrance not as a student, not as someone trying to belong, but as a leader, an artist, a co-founder of something that mattered. The foyer was filled with soft music and murmured conversations. Banners displaying the Thorn Music Collective lined the hallway, showcasing the new youth programs, community grants, and portraits of students whose lives had already been changed. Clara's picture was among them, not one taken from a performance, but a candid photo of her at a workshop, smiling with a child who was cradling a violin like it was treasure. Nathan met her at the edge of the reception hall. He looked different in a tuxedo, less like the sharply calculating CEO and more like the man who had once watched her sing with his heart in his eyes. His smile was warm, steady. "You're radiant," he said quietly. Clara smoothed the fabric of her navy dress, a modest but elegant choice that made her feel grounded. I feel like I'm walking into a dream someone else wrote. He stepped closer. No, you're walking into the one you finally gave yourself permission to write. They walked in together, and heads turned. Not in scandal, not in curiosity, but in recognition. The program tonight would feature a newly commissioned piece, a collaboration between Clara and several young composers from the foundation. The orchestra had rehearsed it for weeks, but Clara had stayed back, intentionally detached from the podium, giving the youth room to lead. Tonight, she would hear it fully for the first time. As they took their seats, Clara glanced across the velvet-draped stage and spotted familiar faces: students, mentors, former teachers, and even the old bookstore owner from her first part-time job in the city. They had come, not for spectacle, but for the music. The conductor stepped up, gave a slight nod, and the piece began. It started with a soft, uncertain melody, delicate strings that echoed Clara's own early compositions. Then came a swell of harmonies, unexpected but true, layered with textures that hinted at different hands, different lives adding their voices. And then a piano entered, gentle, reflective, and unmistakably hers. Clara felt her breath catch. The audience was silent, drawn into the piece that didn't just tell a story. It invited them to feel one. Every rise and fall was a step through a personal journey. The echo of loss, the pulse of courage, the thrill of beginning again. When the final note lingered in the air, there was a pause, then applause, thunderous, genuine, lasting. Nathan leaned over. "You did it." Clara didn't answer with words. She just squeezed his hand. Later that evening, while guests mingled and the reception unfolded with speeches and laughter, Clara stepped away. She found herself near the back courtyard, where string lights hung between trees, and the noise of the city softened into a hush. She stood alone, the cool evening air brushing against her skin like a reminder of how far she had come. This wasn't about validation anymore. It was about presence and peace. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to find Nathan with 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought you might want a minute," he said, offering her one. "I did," she admitted, taking it, "but I'm glad you came." They clinked glasses lightly. No toast, just silence, comfortable and full. "I watched you tonight," he said, when the music started. "You weren't nervous." Clara shook her head. "No, not this time. For the first time, I wasn't afraid it would disappear." He studied her for a moment, then added, "Because it finally came from you, not from who you thought you needed to be." She smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "You've seen me through every version of myself." Nathan stepped forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And I'll keep showing up for all the ones still to come." In that quiet moment, Clara didn't feel like a guest in her own life anymore. She wasn't performing, or proving, or reaching. She was simply present, rooted, seen, and ready for whatever came next. 1 week after the gala, Clara stood in the sunlit kitchen of their brownstone, barefoot and in her favorite threadbare sweater, sipping coffee while soft classical music played in the background. It was a rare, quiet morning, one of those in-between moments where life didn't demand anything but presence. Nathan had stepped out for a meeting, and she had the space all to herself. The studio upstairs waited for her, but today she felt no urgency, just stillness and gratitude. She wandered to the bookshelf in the corner of the living room, running her fingers along the spines until she found an old journal. It was the one she had carried for years, filled with snippets of lyrics, dreams she barely believed in, and names of songs she never had the courage to finish. She sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, and began flipping through it. So much of who she was had lived in those pages. The scared girl at the bookstore, the hesitant dreamer who once whispered melodies into the dark, the artist who thought she had missed her chance. But that wasn't her anymore. Or rather, it still was, just evolved, grown, whole. As she turned the page, a loose note fell out. It was a letter she had written to herself years ago, dated during a time she barely remembered clearly. The handwriting was shakier, the ink smudged in places. "Dear Clara," it began. "If you're reading this, I hope you didn't give up. I hope you kept singing, even when no one was listening. I hope you found someone who heard you, not just the notes, but the silence in between. And I hope you've built something beautiful, even if it looks nothing like what you once imagined. Love, the version of you who still believes." She stared at it for a long time, the words blurring slightly from the tears in her eyes. She hadn't read this in years. And yet here she was, having done it all. Not perfectly, not quickly, but deeply, honestly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan, just 2 words. "Come upstairs." She smiled, slipping on socks and padding up the wooden staircase to the studio. When she opened the door, she paused. The space had been transformed again. A fresh bouquet of lavender sat on the piano. Next to it, a wrapped package. A bow, no card. Clara raised an eyebrow, but didn't need to ask. She opened the package carefully. Inside was a bound book. Leather, hand-stitched. Her name embossed in gold on the cover. Clara's Compositions, Vol. I. She blinked hard. It was filled with her music. Not just the digital versions she had stored across hard drives and notebooks, but handwritten sheets, carefully scanned, printed, and compiled, including the one she'd written the night after her parents died, including the one Nathan had quietly hummed to her months ago when she thought he hadn't even noticed. A soft sound came from behind her. Nathan, leaning against the doorway, watching her with the gentlest expression. "I wanted you to see what I see," he said. Clara swallowed, emotions thick in her throat. "You did all this?" He nodded. "It's not everything, but it's the beginning of everything." She crossed the room to him, the book held close to her chest. "Why?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "Because your music deserves to be held. Not just played, not just performed. Held, treasured, remembered." She pressed her forehead to his chest, the weight of everything washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that night, they walked through Washington Square Park hand in hand, the city lights glowing softly around them. A street performer played a slow jazz tune on the saxophone. Kids chased pigeons across the lawn. The world moved, beautifully unaware of how deeply Clara's own had shifted. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous," Nathan teased, nudging her playfully. She laughed, then continued. "I want to start a residency for women composers, especially the ones who think they've missed their window." Nathan looked at her with quiet pride. "Tell me what you need. I need space, time, resources, and belief." "You've got all of that," he said, "and more." She turned to face him. "But I want to do it on my terms, not just through your name. I want it to be mine. I want to show others what you showed me, that we don't need permission to begin again." He took her face in his hands. Then let's build it. Together. Brick by brick. Bar by bar. In the middle of the park, beneath the city's breath and stars overhead, Clara kissed him. Slow. Sure. The kind of kiss that doesn't announce an ending, but the beginning of something wider, deeper, truer. Something composed not in isolation, but in harmony. And for the first time in her life, Clara didn't just feel like a musician. She felt like a symphony. 1 year after Clara first sang at a stranger's wedding, the newly established Marlowe Arts Conservatory opened its doors in Brooklyn. Nestled between old brick buildings and a mural-covered cafe, the conservatory was modest from the outside, but inside it breathed with light, music, and the kind of hope that only comes from having once nearly given up. Clara stood in the entryway, watching the first group of students trickle in. Young women clutching violin cases, notebooks, battered shoes, bright eyes. One girl wore a faded hoodie with holes in the sleeves and hummed softly as she waited in line. Clara smiled. She saw herself in all of them. Behind her, Nathan slipped a warm hand around her waist. "You did it," he whispered. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We did it." The conservatory was born out of her belief that creativity wasn't a privilege, it was a right. That art wasn't just something to study, it was something to survive by. And that talent could bloom from silence, from struggle, from shadows. Because she had. Nathan hadn't just supported her. He had built with her. He didn't stand in front or behind. He walked beside her, through every hard meeting, every late-night grant application, every moment when she doubted whether the world needed one more arts program. Turns out, it didn't just need one more. It needed this one. And they had done it quietly, purposefully, with no press release, no gala. Just the sound of chairs being arranged, sheet music being passed out, and a piano tuned to the key of possibility. That afternoon, Clara taught her first class. She didn't lecture. She asked each student why they came. "I want to sing without shaking," said one. "I want to write songs I'm not ashamed of," said another. "I want to be heard," whispered a third. Clara listened to each voice like it was the most important note she'd ever heard. "Then let's begin," she said. After class, Nathan found her sitting alone in the small office at the back of the conservatory, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug with the words, "Teach Loud" on it. He leaned against the doorway. "The girls love you already." She smiled, tired but glowing. "They don't even know what they're capable of yet." "They will," he said, "because you see it first." They left the conservatory together, just as dusk settled over the street, the city beginning to glow. As they walked toward the train, Clara paused in front of a music store window. A worn acoustic guitar rested in the display, next to a faded poster advertising open mic nights. She turned to Nathan. "You know, I never did go back and finish that song I started the night before the wedding." "Then maybe it's time," he said. That weekend, Clara sat in the quiet of their home studio. The same one Nathan had built without telling her, now filled with instruments, memories, and moments. She dusted off her old journal, the one she had nearly thrown away too many times. Then she began to write. This time, the melody didn't come from fear or longing. It came from fullness, from having been heard, from knowing that every step, every stumble, every quiet act of courage had led here, to a life not just of music, but of meaning. She called the new song First Verse. It was released on a small indie label 6 weeks later. No marketing campaign, No big debut, just a gentle release into the world. But something about it struck a chord, and for weeks, people wrote letters, sent voice messages, told her that her words had pulled them out of silence too. And quietly, Clara's voice grew, not to become famous, but to become free. Months passed. The conservatory flourished. Her album gained quiet traction. Nathan's company expanded its foundation arm, backing programs in cities beyond New York. But through it all, they stayed rooted, grounded, real. One evening, Clara and Nathan stood in the courtyard of the conservatory after a recital. Students still buzzed around them, laughter echoing between the walls. He turned to her, hand in hers, and asked, "Do you remember the first time I heard you sing?" She laughed. "You mean when I nearly dropped the microphone?" "I remember thinking," he said softly, "that I'd never heard anything so imperfectly beautiful." Clara smiled, pressing her forehead against his. "Thank you for hearing me before I even knew how to speak fully." Nathan brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "You were always singing, Clara. The world just had to quiet down long enough to listen." And there, beneath string lights, and the distant sound of a piano being played by a young student, finding her voice for the first time, Clara knew. This wasn't the end. This was a prelude to the next verse, the next beginning, the next song, written together, sung fearlessly, and never, ever in silence again. In the whirlwind of Clara Ryland and Nathan Calloway's extraordinary journey, what began as a single, trembling note sung beneath fairy lights at a wedding became the opening line of a lifelong symphony, one of resilience, love, purpose, and rediscovered dreams. Clara, once a bookstore assistant with music locked away in journals and whispered in solitude, dared to step onto a stage she never thought she belonged on. What followed was a moment so raw and honest that it didn't just catch Nathan's attention, it changed him. Nathan, a visionary businessman with a fortress-like exterior, heard not just her voice, but everything she wasn't saying. And for perhaps the first time in his successful, curated life, he listened with his heart. Together, they created something greater than either of them could have imagined. From candlelit dinners to late-night songwriting, from the walls of high-rise penthouses to community classrooms filled with young dreamers, they built a world where art and impact coexisted. Clara didn't just find her voice, she amplified others. Through the Marlowe Arts Conservatory, she gave girls like her, quiet, unsure, overlooked, a place to believe in their creativity, to claim their space. Nathan, in turn, learned how to slow down, how to soften. He wasn't a savior. He was a partner. He saw her not as someone to rescue, but as someone to believe in. And that belief transformed everything. Their story is not one of perfection. There were fears, walls, old wounds. But what made their bond unshakable was the way they met each moment, with truth. They didn't rush into love. They unfolded into it, one gesture at a time, one act of quiet courage after another. So what's the lesson? That the life we dream of is often waiting, just beyond the fear we've grown too comfortable living with. That the right people don't need you to be louder, flashier, or more polished. They need you to be you. And that your passion, the thing you've shelved, silenced, or deemed impossible, may be the very gift the world is missing. In a world that often asks us to shrink, Clara and Nathan's story is a call to expand, to trust in unexpected beginnings, to believe that even from a single small voice, change, love, and legacy can rise. Now it's your turn. If you were in Clara's shoes, would you A. Play it safe and stay in the shadows? B. Step into the unknown and risk being seen? Drop your answer in the comments, A or B, and tell us why. Your story might inspire someone else to begin theirs. And now, we'd love to hear from you. What did Clara and Nathan's journey mean to you? Which moment stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can learn from your insight, your reflections, your heart. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more stories that touch, uplift, and remind us all of the power in simply being heard. Until next time, keep believing, keep dreaming, and never underestimate the quiet beginnings.